But I've been the lead instructor of the Modjeska Simkins School for Human Rights since 2019. So since before the pandemic, which feels like generations ago now, it seems. When I was first invited to do it by Brett Bursey in 2019, I had just finished my PhD at the University of South Carolina, and I had begun a tenure track position at Claflin University in Orangeburg, South Carolina. And by that point, speaking with Brett, speaking with others in the community, I had learned a great deal about Modjeska Simkins. Now, I must apologize. I am not from South Carolina originally. I'm actually from the state of Georgia.
Barely.
What do you mean barely?
Just on the other side of the river.
I mean, yeah, I'm from Augusta, Georgia. But the reason I mention this is that even growing up in Augusta, you didn't really learn much about the history of South Carolina, even though it's heavily impacting us every single day. Now, working and living here in Columbia since 2012, going to USC, interacting with so many folks in the community here in Columbia and around the state, I have come to realize just how rich the history of this state actually is. That richness of history has to include Modjeska Simkins. And what especially concerns me in 2024, working at Claflin since 2018 now, is that most of our students who are from South Carolina still don't know who she actually is. We have a lot of work to do in this state, and I like to think that the Modjeska Simkins School of Human Rights is playing a role in that particular fight, and I do mean a fight. We are involved in a struggle to make sure that folks in this state and across the country actually know the true history of South Carolina and the United States of America. If we do not know this history, we will not only repeat the mistakes of the past, but we shall make new and bigger mistakes in the future. We're already seeing some of that right now. But I also want to make it clear that part of what makes our school unique is that it actually links back to what Ms. Simkins herself did during her lifetime. I think Brett has told me before about how in the late 1940s, Ms. Simkins actually taught a freedom school here in South Carolina. Some of the same things he discussed back then in the 40s are the same things we're talking about in 2024. Not just racism, but structural racism. Not just class issues, but also labor issues, labor rights, and human rights. Brett again mentioned the SNYC conference, Southern Negro Youth Congress conference in Columbia in 1946. If you ever go back and read some of the remarks by W.E.B. Du Bois at that conference or others at that conference, what you'll find is that the dreams and fears of those living in the post-World War II years are very similar to the dreams and fears we have right now in 2024. The bad news is that fascism finds a way to simmer and fester and to stay around and hang around. The good news, though, is that we have folks like Modjeska Simkins to look to for examples of how to fight and defeat that fascism. Because goodness knows we need examples of heroes, especially right now. This is not to simply glorify Mrs. Simkins. This is to make it clear that she is the type of person we all should at least emulate and learn about. At the end of the day, if you live in South Carolina, you are not just living in a state that was influenced by a John C. Calhoun or a Ben Tillman or a James Burns. You are also living in a state that was affected and impacted by the rebels in Stono, by Robert Smalls, by Septima Clark, and by Modjeska Simkins. We have a lot of work to do in this state. And again, the Modjeska Simkins School of Human Rights is trying to play a role in making this state a better place for all of us to live in. And again, on a personal note, I have to say that teaching the Modjeska Simkins School since 2019 has been the most important thing I've done in my entire life. More than having a tenure track position, more than writing for various publications, more than anything else that I do, when I am in this room teaching students who are either here or on Zoom, what I feel is a genuine love of history from our students and a genuine love of humanity from our students as well. Because if you want to learn that true history of South Carolina, what you're actually saying is, I want to make a difference. I want to make this place a better place. And so we honor Modjeska Simkins by being here this evening, but we also honor her by continuing the fight to learn history, to learn the true history of South Carolina, to learn a people's history, a grassroots history of the Palmetto State. Because it's not just about the Calhouns and the Tillmans and all the bad guys. It's also about the men and the women who led the fight against those people to say, South Carolina can be better, can be more than what it is. Thank you.
Justice Monteith Simkins in 1967, June to be exact. I had just been drafted by a fellow named Vernon Jordan to come back home to South Carolina to do voter registration. The 1965 Voting Rights Act had been passed, and the Ford Foundation and a group of other foundations put together a pool of money and sent it to Atlanta to form what they call the Voter Education Project of the South. Vernon Jordan's job was to find somebody in each of the 11 southern states to direct the voter registration drive. So Ms. Simkins and some other people here in South Carolina pointed him to me. I'm in Washington, D.C., finishing Howard University Law School. And Vernon Jordan came up and said, Negro, you need to take your behind back home and get your people registered to vote. Well, you don't say no to Vernon Jordan. If you know him, you don't say no to Vernon. So I came back, and the greeting party included Miss Simkins and 7 other men in Columbia. She was the only female in the group. We met at Second Nazareth Baptist Church, Reverend William McKinley Bowman's church, for the greeting. Afterwards, she pulled me aside and she said, young man, now you be careful. You watch some of these people here. Because while they're going to smile in your face, they're going to do other things behind your back. I said, thank you, Miss Simkins. And we struck up a friendship that lasted until her funeral. In, I think it was August of 1964, her portrait, no, it's not that one, it's not that one either, I'll show you the one that was hung in the State House. And they had a big celebration. Brett Bursey was there to speak, and I was there to speak on behalf of the NAACP. So I'm going to share with you what I said that night, and it'll give you a good description of Modjeska Simkins. It's in this book that I wrote about civil rights in South Carolina, and it'll be available here soon, right,
Indeed.
Brett? Okay.
To purchase. Jim's on Social Security, okay?
Okay. Remembering Modjeska, a tribute to Mary Modjeska Monteith Simkins. It's only fitting and proper that a portrait of Mary Modjeska Monteith Simkins be unveiled here today in this State House in remembrance of her. I remember Modjeska for being one of the founding members of the South Carolina Conference of NAACP. I remember Modjeska for serving as a field secretary for the South Carolina NAACP and receiving no pay for her work. I remember Modjeska for discovering that white teachers were earning more than black teachers in 1943, and she pushed for legislation that led to the Thompson versus Gibbs and the equalization of teachers' pay in South Carolina. I remember Modjeska giving civil rights seminars to students from Allen and Benedict College from behind the telecage at Victory Savings Bank on Hardin Street. I remember Modjeska, who would drive alone to Clarendon County, 60 miles away, for a mass meeting, and then would have the last word in the debate after the meeting in Billy Fleming's house at his bar. I remember Modjeska, who cranked out more press releases and letters to the editor than all of the civil rights group in South Carolina combined. I remember Modjeska, who had a great sense of humor and was quite a crowd pleaser, but she was a fierce warrior asserting freedoms for all of us. I remember Modjeska, who was just at ease registering winos to vote on Reed Street as she was entertaining Thurgood Marshall at her home on Marion Street. And I will remember Modjeska as a legend in her own time. She was our Harriet Tubman and our Sojourner Truth. She was a woman who woke up every morning with freedom on her mind. So after today, when you happen to be passing the State House one evening and the lights are flashing and the building is shaking, don't be alarmed. That will just be Modjeska debating Edgar Brown, Saul Brott, Marion Gresham, and Ben Tillman. And she will be winning the argument.
The woman was so well-rounded. I would know something I was so excited about. And I remember very specifically being involved with the situation in Angola when the Angolan freedom fighters, this was in probably the early 80s, maybe the late 70s. And I go in to talk about it, and she knows the names of the people that are in the counter-revolutionary part that are trying to overthrow the occupation of the French that are working with the and it's like, wow. And so I took boxes and boxes and boxes and boxes of stuff from the little house behind her house that are now at the Carolina, the Modjeska Simkins collection. And you can go read this stuff. But what I want to do is to remember the spirit that she had, the indomitable spirit. She was fighting for her own spirit. And that's the best we can do right now. For yourself. To Modjeska! Music!